My name is Julia, I'm 35 years old, and last Thanksgiving, my mother stood in front of our entire family and said the words that should have destroyed me. We wish you were never born. 20 pairs of eyes turned to watch me crumble, but instead, I smiled and slowly stood up from my chair. What happened next didn't just change my relationship with my family, it revealed 35 years of secrets that would leave everyone speechless. Before I continue this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you someone who understands complicated family dynamics? If this resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories that matter. Sometimes the most painful moments lead to our greatest transformations, and what I'm about to share might just give you the courage to stand up too. Let's dive into what really happened that day. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant understanding your role from day one. I was the firstborn, the one who came into this world already disappointing my parents simply by existing. My sister Emma arrived 3 years later, and from that moment, the family dynamic was set in stone. She was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I became the scapegoat for everything that went wrong in our family. I spent my childhood chasing approval that would never come. Straight A's through elementary school earned me a pat on the head, while Emma's C's were celebrated with ice cream parties because she tried so hard. I won the state science fair in 8th grade, and my parents forgot to attend. Emma participated in a school play where she forgot her only line, and they threw her a congratulations party. By high school, I had internalized the message, nothing I did would ever be enough. College became my escape plan. I worked 3 jobs while maintaining a full scholarship to Northwestern University. Every penny I earned went toward textbooks, rent, and ramen noodles. Meanwhile, my parents paid Emma's full tuition at a private art school, bought her a car, and sent her monthly allowances. When I graduated magna cum laude with a degree in marketing, my parents didn't attend the ceremony. They were busy helping Emma move back home after she dropped out in her sophomore year. The revisionist history began immediately. Suddenly, Emma had always been the smart one who was too creative for traditional education. My academic achievements were minimized as book smart but not street smart or lucky but not talented. Friends and relatives who remembered the truth were gradually pushed away, replaced by new acquaintances who only knew the fabricated version where Emma was the star and I was the difficult child who caused problems. I built my career brick by brick, climbing from entry-level coordinator to marketing executive at a Fortune 500 company. Each promotion felt like a small victory against the narrative my family had written about me. But success in the outside world only seemed to increase the resentment at home. Family dinners became interrogations about why I was too good for my hometown, why I thought I was better than everyone else just because I had a career. The pressure about marriage and children started in my late 20s. Every family gathering included pointed questions about my empty ring finger and vacant womb. What they didn't know was that I had suffered 3 miscarriages in private, each one grieved alone because I knew my pain would be dismissed or, worse, used as evidence of my failure as a woman. Emma, living rent-free in our parents' basement, was praised for taking her time to find herself while I was criticized for being a career-obsessed spinster. Last month, everything escalated when Emma announced her pregnancy at a family barbecue. The joy and celebration were overwhelming, with my parents practically building a shrine to their future grandchild. My mother pulled me aside that day, her eyes cold as she said, "Finally, someone in this family is giving us what we actually want." The implication was clear: everything I had achieved, every success I had earned, meant nothing compared to Emma's ability to procreate. Thanksgiving arrived with its usual promise of family togetherness, though I knew better than to expect warmth at my parents' table. I spent the morning preparing my contributions. Homemade cranberry sauce from scratch, roasted Brussels sprouts with bacon, and 2 pumpkin pies made from my grandmother's recipe. I also brought 2 bottles of expensive wine, hoping maybe this year would be different. The moment I walked through the door, I knew I had miscalculated. Emma was sprawled across the couch, her hand dramatically placed on her still flat stomach, while my mother Grace fussed over her like she was made of spun glass. My father Robert barely looked up from the television to acknowledge my arrival. The dining room was already set for dinner, and I noticed Emma's name card at the head of the table next to my parents', while mine was relegated to the far corner near the kitchen door. "Julie is here," my mother announced to the room with the enthusiasm typically reserved for announcing a tax audit. She brought wine again. As if we need alcohol when Emma's expecting. The criticism started before I even set down my dishes. Everything I did was wrong. The cranberry sauce was too tart, the Brussels sprouts were fancy food that no one would eat, and bringing wine was insensitive to Emma's condition. As relatives began arriving, the passive-aggressive comments escalated. Aunt Martha and Uncle Bill exchanged uncomfortable glances as my mother pointedly seated everyone according to their importance to the family's future. Emma's boyfriend of 2 months was placed in a position of honor, while I was seated between 2 empty chairs that my mother explained were being saved for when Julia finally brings someone worth meeting. Dinner began with my father's traditional toast, which this year focused entirely on Emma's pregnancy and the joy of finally becoming grandparents. "Some daughters understand what really matters in life," he said, raising his glass while looking directly at me. "Family, children, continuing the legacy. Not everyone is selfish enough to deny their parents this basic happiness." My cousin Rachel tried to steer the conversation toward neutral ground, mentioning my recent promotion to senior director. My mother cut her off mid-sentence. "Career achievements are nice, dear, but they don't keep you warm at night or carry on the family name. Julia will understand that when she's 60 and alone with her fancy job title." Emma, emboldened by the attention, decided to twist the knife deeper. She rubbed her belly in exaggerated circles while sighing loudly. "I just feel so blessed to be giving Mom and Dad what they've always wanted. It must be so hard for them, having one daughter who gets it and one who just doesn't." Her smirk was visible to everyone at the table, though my parents seemed blind to her cruelty. The final assault came during dessert. My mother stood up, tapping her fork against her wine glass to get everyone's attention. "I want to make a special toast," she began, her voice thick with false emotion. "To Emma, our real daughter, who understands that family comes first. Who isn't too selfish to share her life with others. Who doesn't think she's too good for the people who raised her." She turned to look directly at me, her eyes hard as granite. "And to Julia, who despite having every opportunity, every advantage, chooses to disappoint us daily. Who wastes her life on meaningless pursuits while her sister gives us the one thing we've begged for. Sometimes I look at you and think about all the sacrifices we made, all the hopes we had, and I realize it was all for nothing." The room had gone silent except for the sound of my uncle nervously clearing his throat. Emma added her voice to the assault. "At least now they'll have a grandchild who actually loves them. Someone who won't abandon them for a corner office and a fat paycheck." My mother nodded approvingly at Emma before delivering the final blow. Her voice was steady, deliberate, and loud enough for everyone to hear clearly. "We wish you were never born, Julia. Then we could have put all our love and resources into the daughter who actually deserved it." Gasps erupted around the table. Aunt Martha dropped her fork. Cousin Rachel's mouth fell open. Even Uncle Bill, who typically avoided family drama, looked shocked. But I didn't react the way they expected. Instead of crying, instead of running from the room, instead of screaming back, I simply smiled. It wasn't a sad smile or a broken smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been handed the key to their own freedom. I slowly pushed back my chair and stood up, that smile never leaving my face. Standing there with 23 pairs of eyes fixed on me, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My movements were calm, deliberate, almost theatrical in their precision. "You know what, Mom? You're absolutely right. I have been a terrible daughter. So terrible, in fact, that I think it's time everyone knew exactly how awful I've been." I swiped open my banking app and held the phone up for everyone to see. "This terrible daughter has been paying your mortgage for the past 3 years. $1,200 a month every month, because you couldn't manage your finances after Dad's gambling problem got out of hand." My father's face went white as several relatives turned to stare at him. The gambling addiction he'd hidden so carefully was now exposed like a fresh wound. But wait, there's more, I continued, my voice steady and clear. This selfish, career-obsessed daughter also paid $50,000 for Dad's heart surgery last year. You remember, don't you? The surgery you told everyone was covered by insurance? I have the receipts right here. Every single payment to the hospital, the cardiac surgeon, the anesthesiologist. Paid in full by the daughter you wish was never born. Emma tried to interject, her face flushing red. You're just trying to make yourself look good. Money doesn't equal love, Julia. You can't buy your way into being a good daughter. I turned my smile toward her, and something in my expression made her shrink back into her chair. You're right, Emma. Money doesn't equal love. Which is why I also paid for your 3 rehab stints that you told everyone were spa retreats. $28,000 total. I have the admission forms, the payment receipts, and oh, what's this? A thank you card from your counselor at Serenity Hills saying how proud she was of your progress in overcoming your cocaine addiction. The room erupted. My mother jumped to her feet, her face contorting with rage. How dare you spread lies about your sister? Emma has never touched drugs in her life. But Emma's face told a different story. She had gone pale, her hands shaking as she clutched her stomach. I continued scrolling through my phone, pulling up email after email, receipt after receipt. Mom's shopping addiction? $42,000 in credit card debt that I cleared to keep you from filing bankruptcy. Dad's secret apartment that he used for his affairs? I paid the back rent to prevent eviction and exposure. Emma's car that she crashed while driving under the influence? I paid off the other driver to keep it out of court. But I wasn't done. The biggest revelation was yet to come. And Emma's pregnancy? The one you're all celebrating? The reason I'm such a disappointment? I pulled up Emma's Instagram account, screenshots I had saved just in case. These are from last week. Emma doing shots at Moonlight Lounge. Emma smoking outside Red Door Bar. Emma dancing on tables at Club Paradise. Strange behavior for someone who's supposedly 3 months pregnant. Emma exploded from her chair. You stalked my social media? You're insane. I can have 1 drink while pregnant. Lots of women do. But the damage was done. Several relatives were already pulling up her Instagram on their own phones, seeing the post she had forgotten to delete. Photos of her with cigarettes, doing body shots, clearly intoxicated. 1 drink? I asked quietly. How about we ask why you were posting about your food baby from eating too many tacos the same night you announced your pregnancy to our parents? Or why you've been asking friends on Facebook about the best ways to fake pregnancy symptoms? My mother's face had gone from red to purple. Even if some of this is true, it doesn't excuse what you've done to this family. Holding money over our heads, thinking you're better than us. She was grasping at straws now, trying to regain control of the narrative that had spun completely out of her hands. I never held it over your heads, I replied calmly. I never mentioned it once. I paid your bills quietly, handled your crises without complaint, and continued showing up to be insulted and belittled at every family gathering. But you're right about one thing. This terrible, selfish daughter is done. As of today, I'm canceling all automatic payments. The mortgage, the credit cards, the utility bills I've been covering. It's all over. The silence that followed was deafening. My father finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. You can't do that. We'll lose the house. We'll be ruined. I looked at him with the same steady gaze I used in boardrooms when closing million-dollar deals. Then I guess you'd better hope Emma's pregnancy is real and that her boyfriend of 2 months is ready to support not just her, but all of you. Because this disappointment of a daughter is officially done being your personal ATM and emotional punching bag. I gathered my purse and coat, leaving my homemade dishes on the table. Happy Thanksgiving. May you finally get everything you deserve. As I walked toward the door, the room erupted in chaos behind me. Accusations flew, Emma was crying, my parents were shouting, and relatives were choosing sides. But I didn't look back. I had finally shown them exactly who the disappointment in the family really was, and it wasn't me. The next morning arrived with the kind of drama I should have anticipated but somehow didn't. I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked urgently on my door. "Julia, there's a situation in the lobby. Your parents are here, and security is asking what you want them to do." Through my office window, I could see my mother gesticulating wildly at the security desk while my father paced behind her, his face red with anger. I made my way down to the lobby, where my parents had attracted a small crowd of curious onlookers. The moment my mother saw me, she launched into a performance worthy of a daytime soap opera. "There she is. Our ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family. Who spread vicious lies about her pregnant sister. What kind of monster turns her back on the parents who gave her life?" The security guard, a young man named Marcus whom I'd always been friendly with, looked uncomfortable but stood his ground. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a place of business, and you're creating a disturbance." My father pushed forward, pointing an accusing finger at me. "We'll leave when our daughter apologizes and fixes what she's done. You've poisoned everyone against us, Julia. Your own cousin Rachel won't return your mother's calls." My boss, Simon Chen, appeared at my elbow, having heard the commotion from his office. He was a distinguished man in his 60s who had mentored me for years and knew about my family's situation in broad strokes. "Is there a problem here?" he asked calmly, though his presence immediately commanded authority. My mother turned her theatrical performance toward him. "Are you her boss? You should know what kind of person you employ. Someone who abandons sick, elderly parents. Someone without an ounce of human compassion." But Simon had dealt with difficult people his entire career. "I know exactly who I employ, ma'am. One of the most dedicated, professional, and ethical directors this company has ever had. Now, security has asked you to leave. I suggest you comply before we're forced to involve the police." The threat of law enforcement finally penetrated my parents' rage. They left, but not before my mother shouted loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, "This isn't over, Julia. You'll regret this." By lunch, the assault had moved to social media. Emma had posted a carefully crafted sob story on Facebook, complete with ultrasound photos she had apparently stolen from a pregnancy website. "My heart is broken," her post read. "My own sister, consumed by jealousy over my pregnancy, has torn our family apart with lies and manipulation. She's even convinced some relatives that I'm faking my pregnancy. Please pray for our family and especially for my parents, who are devastated by Julia's cruelty." The post went viral within our extended social circle. Friends from high school, distant relatives, and even some of my college acquaintances began weighing in. Some defended me, having witnessed my family's behavior over the years, but others bought into Emma's narrative completely. My phone buzzed with messages ranging from supportive to accusatory. I made the decision to stay off social media entirely, focusing instead on documentation. That evening, things escalated further. I had just returned home from work when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Derek, my ex-boyfriend from 5 years ago, standing awkwardly in the hallway. We had ended things amicably when our careers took us in different directions, and he had since married a lovely woman named Linda. I opened the door cautiously. "Derek? What are you doing here?" His expression was a mix of embarrassment and concern. "Julia, I'm sorry to just show up, but I thought you should know. Your parents contacted me today. They tried to convince me that we should get back together, that you were spiraling out of control and needed someone to save you. When I told them I was happily married, they suggested I should divorce Linda because you and I were meant to be. It was honestly unhinged." I invited him in for coffee, and he showed me the 37 text messages my parents had sent him over the course of the day. They ranged from pleading to threatening, with my mother suggesting that Derek was the only one who could talk sense into Julia and my father implying that I was having some kind of breakdown. Linda knows I'm here, Derek assured me. She's actually the one who insisted I warn you in person. She said if her parents acted like this, she'd want someone to give her a heads up. The next morning brought a new level of violation. I had left for an early meeting, promising a client I'd review their campaign strategy before our 9 o'clock call. When I returned home that afternoon, my apartment door was ajar, the wood around the lock splintered. My heart pounding, I called the police before entering. The officers found my apartment ransacked, with specific items missing. My grandmother's wedding ring, important documents including my passport and birth certificate, and several pieces of jewelry. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, emerged from her apartment as the police were documenting the scene. "Julia. I saw everything. It was your sister, the pregnant one. She had some man with her, kept saying you had stolen things from your parents' house and she was just getting them back. I told her I was calling the police, but she laughed and said family doesn't arrest family." The security footage confirmed Mrs. Chen's account. There was Emma, clearly not pregnant based on her agile movements as she climbed through my window, accompanied by a man I didn't recognize. The police arrested her that evening, but as predicted, my parents bailed her out within hours. The desk sergeant, a woman who had seen plenty of family drama, shook her head as I filed the reports. "Holidays bring out the worst in people," she said. "But this is something else entirely." The situation at work deteriorated when I discovered my car had been vandalized in the company parking garage. Deep scratches spelled out "selfish bitch" across the driver's side, and all 4 tires had been slashed. Security footage was inconclusive, showing only a figure in a hoodie, but I recognized my father's distinctive limp from an old football injury. Simon called me into his office that afternoon, his expression grave. "Julia, I want you to know that this company stands behind you completely," he began, gesturing for me to sit. "But I'm concerned for your safety. Would you like us to arrange for additional security? Perhaps work from home for a while?" I appreciated his concern but refused to be driven from the job I loved. Instead, we compromised on a security escort to and from my car and a temporary parking spot near the security office. The electronic assault began that evening. My bank called to alert me to multiple attempts to access my accounts using my social security number and mother's maiden name. Someone had tried to initiate password resets on everything from my retirement accounts to my credit cards. The bank's fraud department walked me through adding additional security measures, but the violation felt profound. These people who claimed to love me were systematically trying to destroy my life. My phone rang constantly with calls from unknown numbers. When I made the mistake of answering one, I heard my mother's voice, slurred with wine and venom. "You think you're so smart, Julia? So successful? We made you. Everything you have is because of us. And we can unmake you just as easily. Emma's the only daughter we need. You're nothing but a mistake we should have corrected 35 years ago." The voicemails grew progressively more threatening. My father's messages alternated between rage and manipulation. "You're killing your mother, Julia. She hasn't eaten in days. Is your pride worth destroying your family?" Then, an hour later, "I know where you work, where you live, where you shop. You can't hide from family. We're in your blood, and blood always tells." By the end of the week, I had installed new locks, a security system with cameras at every entrance, and had changed every password and security question on every account I owned. I documented every incident, every threat, every attempted breach of my privacy and security. The folder of evidence grew thicker by the day, a testament to how far my family would go to punish me for revealing their secrets and cutting off their financial supply. But I wasn't broken. Each attack only reinforced that I had made the right decision. A family that would go to these lengths to hurt me had never loved me at all. They had only loved what I could provide. Money, a target for their anger, someone to blame for their failures. As I sat in my secured apartment, reviewing the restraining order paperwork my friend had prepared, I realized that their escalating attacks were actually signs of their desperation. They were showing everyone exactly who they really were, and I no longer had to carry the burden of protecting their reputation. In the midst of the chaos, unexpected support began to emerge from corners I hadn't anticipated. The first call came from my cousin Rachel on a Tuesday evening, just as I was reviewing the security footage from my apartment break-in for the 100th time. "Julia, it's me. Please don't hang up. I know my mom is your mom's sister, but I need you to know that not everyone in the family is blind to what's been happening." Rachel's voice was steady but emotional as she continued. "I've watched this dynamic for literally our entire lives. The way they've treated you versus Emma, it's been obvious and wrong, and nobody ever said anything. Well, I'm saying something now. I recorded everything at Thanksgiving dinner on my phone. The whole thing. Your mom's speech, Emma's lies, all of it. I thought you might need it." The relief I felt was overwhelming. Having concrete evidence from an outside source felt like validation after years of being told I was too sensitive or imagining things. Rachel went on to explain that she had already shared the video with several family members who had been fed Emma's version of events. "The tide is turning, Julia. People are starting to see the truth." The next morning, Aunt Martha called. She had always been quieter than my mother, often fading into the background at family gatherings. "Julia, dear, I've held my tongue for too long, and I'm ashamed of that. Your mother, she's always been jealous of you. From the time you were little, she saw something in you that reminded her of her own failed dreams, and instead of being proud, she resented it." Martha revealed things I had never known. How my mother had wanted to go to college but gotten pregnant with me instead. How she had blamed me for ruining her life since the day I was born. How Emma's birth had been a do-over in her mind, a chance to have the daughter she actually wanted. "I should have spoken up years ago," Martha said, her voice heavy with regret. "But Grace is my sister, and I thought. I hoped things would get better. I'm sorry, Julia. You deserved so much better." Support came from professional quarters as well. My best friend since college, Sophia Martinez, was now a successful attorney specializing in family law. When I told her about the escalating harassment, she immediately offered her services pro bono. "Julia, this isn't just family drama anymore. This is criminal harassment, attempted fraud, breaking and entering. We need to protect you legally before this escalates further." At work, my boss Simon revealed his own story during a private lunch meeting. "My parents disowned me when I married outside our culture," he said quietly, something I had never known in all our years working together. "They showed up at my office, at my home, tried to get me fired. I know what it's like to be attacked by the people who should love you most. This company is your safe space, Julia. We protect our own." Even my doorman, Mrs. Chen, became an unexpected ally. This 70-year-old woman who had lived next door for the past 5 years turned out to be a former social worker who had seen every type of family dysfunction imaginable. "I've been watching your family visit over the years," she told me over tea in her apartment. "The way they treat you, it's textbook emotional abuse. I kept detailed notes in my journal, just in case. Would those help with your case?" The most surprising ally came in the form of Linda, Derek's wife. She called me one afternoon, her voice warm and supportive. "Julia, I hope this isn't overstepping, but Derek showed me the messages from your parents, and I'm horrified. I'm a therapist, and what they're doing is classic narcissistic abuse. Derek and I want you to know we're both willing to testify about their harassment if needed. Nobody deserves what they're putting you through." Dr. Patricia Williams, my therapist whom I had started seeing years ago to deal with family issues, offered to provide documentation of our sessions. "Julia, I've been documenting your family's emotional abuse patterns for 3 years. With your permission, I can provide a professional assessment that could be crucial for your legal case. Your mental health struggles are directly linked to their treatment, and it's time that was officially recognized." A group chat formed organically, started by Rachel and including the allies who had reached out. She named it Team Julia, and it became a lifeline of support. Aunt Martha shared stories of my achievements that my parents had hidden from the family. Mrs. Chin posted updates whenever suspicious people lurked around our building. Sophia provided legal updates and advice. Even Derek and Linda checked in regularly, offering both emotional support and practical help. Through this network, more truth emerged. Rachel discovered that Emma had been lying about the pregnancy to multiple people, with different due dates and details depending on her audience. A high school friend in the medical field confirmed that the ultrasound photos Emma posted were stock images available on the first page of Google results. My parents' financial situation was even worse than I had known, with liens against the house and massive undisclosed debts. The group became instrumental in building my legal case. Everyone contributed evidence, recordings, screenshots, witnessed incidents, documented patterns of behavior spanning decades. Sophia organized everything into a comprehensive file that painted an undeniable picture of systematic abuse, financial exploitation, and escalating criminal behavior. One evening, Marcus from building security joined our support network after witnessing another attempted ambush by my parents in the lobby. "I've been in security for 15 years, he told the group. "I've seen stalkers with less determination than these people. Julia, we've implemented your photo at all security checkpoints. You have more support here than you know." My colleague Marcus Washington offered another layer of protection, volunteering to escort me to my car each evening and checking in throughout the day. "My sister went through something similar with our family," he explained. "I couldn't help her then, but I can help you now. You don't have to face this alone." Even my company's HR department stepped up, with the director personally ensuring that my emergency contacts were updated and that security had clear instructions regarding my family. "We've dealt with workplace harassment before," she assured me, "but family harassment requires extra vigilance. We've got your back." As the days passed, the support network grew stronger while my family's attacks grew more desperate. But now, instead of facing them alone, I had an army of chosen family standing with me. Each person who stepped forward with evidence, support, or simple kindness reinforced what I was learning: family isn't defined by blood but by who shows up when you need them most. The contrast was stark. My biological family was working overtime to destroy me, while this group of colleagues, neighbors, friends, and even near strangers were working just as hard to protect and support me. For the first time in my life, I understood what real family felt like. It wasn't obligation or guilt or manipulation. It was choosing to stand with someone because it was right, expecting nothing in return except the knowledge that you had helped someone who needed it. The court date arrived on a cold December morning, 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. I dressed carefully in my best navy suit, the one I wore for major client presentations. Sophia had coached me thoroughly, but nothing could have prepared me for seeing my entire family on the other side of the courtroom. My parents had hired an expensive lawyer, presumably with money they had borrowed from someone new since I'd cut them off. Their attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Richard Thornton, immediately tried to paint me as the aggressor. "Your Honor, my clients are elderly parents who have been emotionally and financially devastated by their daughter's cruel abandonment. They simply want to restore their family relationship and are being painted as criminals for their efforts at reconciliation." But Sophia had come prepared with overwhelming evidence. She began with the Thanksgiving video, Rachel's clear recording playing on the courtroom screen. You could hear every word of my mother's cruel speech, see Emma's smirking face, watch my father nodding along as my mother wished I had never been born. Several people in the gallery gasped when they heard the full context. "Your Honor," Sophia continued, methodically presenting evidence, "this video represents just the culmination of decades of documented emotional abuse. I have here therapeutic records, with my client's permission, documenting systematic favoritism, emotional manipulation, and financial exploitation dating back years." She presented Dr. Williams' professional assessment, which detailed the impact of narcissistic abuse on my mental health and development. The financial evidence was particularly damning. Sophia had subpoenaed records showing not just the money I had given my parents, but what they had done with it. While claiming poverty and depending on my support, they had been funneling money to Emma for luxury purchases, vacations, and yes, multiple rehab stays that they had hidden from everyone. The paper trail was undeniable. When Emma took the stand, her story began to unravel immediately. Pressed about her pregnancy, she claimed she had miscarried due to the stress I had caused. But when Sophia presented her social media posts from just days before, showing her drinking and partying, Emma broke down. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," she screamed from the witness stand. "They've always expected me to be perfect, to be better than her. I had to give them something." The admission stunned even my parents. My mother's face went white as Emma continued her meltdown. "They told me I was the good daughter, the one who could do no wrong. But nothing I did was ever enough unless it made Julia look bad. So yes, I lied about the pregnancy. I lie about everything. That's what this family does." The security footage from my apartment building was played next, showing Emma breaking in with her unidentified accomplice. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was retrieving family property, but when pressed to identify what family property I had supposedly stolen, they couldn't provide any evidence. The police report detailing the items actually stolen, including my grandmother's ring that had been left to me specifically in her will, further damaged their case. My father took the stand next, trying to portray himself as a concerned parent pushed to desperate measures. But Sophia systematically destroyed his testimony with the threatening voicemails he had left, the evidence of him vandalizing my car, and bank records showing his attempted fraud. When confronted with his gambling debts and the secret apartment he'd maintained for affairs, his confident demeanor crumbled. The character witnesses were perhaps the most powerful. Mrs. Chen, dignified in her best dress, testified about years of witnessing my family's treatment of me. Marcus from security detailed the harassment at my workplace. Derek and Linda testified together about my parents' attempts to manipulate their marriage. Even Aunt Martha took the stand, tearfully admitting her complicity in staying silent for too long and confirming the pattern of abuse. When the judge finally ruled, his words were scathing. "In my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a clear case of systematic abuse, harassment, and attempted fraud by parents against their own child. The evidence presented shows a pattern of behavior that escalated from emotional abuse to criminal actions including breaking and entering, vandalism, and attempted financial fraud." He granted the restraining order with the maximum possible restrictions. My parents and Emma were forbidden from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. Any attempt at contact, direct or through third parties, would result in immediate arrest. He also ordered them to pay restitution for the damaged property and stolen items, though I knew I'd never see a penny of it. Outside the courthouse, my parents made one last attempt at manipulation. As my support team surrounded me, my mother broke away from her lawyer and called out, "Julia. Please. We're your family. Blood is thicker than water. You can't just throw us away." Her voice broke on false tears that might have worked years ago. I stopped and turned to face them one final time. My voice was calm and clear as I responded, "You're right. The full quote is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means the bonds we choose are stronger than the bonds we're born with. And I choose the family that has stood by me, supported me, and actually loved me. That's not you. It never was." Emma, mascara running down her face, made her own plea. "Julia, I'm sorry. I was pressured. I'm pregnant for real now, I swear. Don't you want to be an aunt? Don't you want to know your niece or nephew?" The manipulation was so transparent it was almost pitiful. "No, Emma," I replied simply. "I don't believe you're pregnant, and even if you are, I wouldn't subject an innocent child to your toxicity. I've spent 35 years being the scapegoat for this family's dysfunction. It ends here. Get help, all of you. But do it far away from me." As we walked away, my chosen family forming a protective circle around me, my parents' lawyer could be heard telling them about the consequences of violating the restraining order. The local news crew that had picked up the story was already preparing their segment, "Local Woman Wins Restraining Order Against Abusive Family." The court documents were public record now. Their carefully maintained facade was permanently shattered. Simon, who had attended the hearing for moral support, placed a paternal hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Julia. It takes incredible strength to stand up to family like that." Rachel, walking on my other side, added, "You're free now. Really, truly free." But it wasn't until we reached Sophia's car that the full weight of what had happened hit me. For the first time in my life, I had legally severed ties with the people who had tormented me since birth. There would be no more obligatory holiday dinners, no more emotional manipulation, no more being blamed for their failures. The relief was overwhelming. That evening, my support group gathered at my apartment for a victory dinner. Mrs. Chen had cooked enough food for an army, Derek and Linda brought champagne, and Sophia presented me with a framed copy of the restraining order, which got a laugh from everyone. As I looked around at these people who had stood by me, who had believed me, who had fought for me, I realized that I had already won the greatest victory. I had found my real family. 6 months after the courthouse confrontation, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. The restraining order held firm, despite 2 attempts by my parents to violate it, both resulting in brief jail stays that finally drove home the seriousness of their situation. Emma had disappeared from social media entirely after being exposed for faking her pregnancy multiple times. The family members who had initially sided with them gradually reached out with apologies, though I was selective about which relationships I chose to rebuild. My career had not only survived the family drama but somehow thrived because of it. Simon had promoted me to vice president of marketing, noting that anyone who could handle a crisis with such grace and determination was exactly who he wanted leading his team. The story of standing up to my toxic family had somehow made me a more respected leader, someone who clearly had boundaries and wouldn't tolerate abuse in any form. The most unexpected development came from the publicity surrounding the case. After the local news coverage, I was contacted by numerous people who had experienced similar family situations. Their stories poured in, each one echoing themes of scapegoating, favoritism, and financial exploitation. It became clear that my experience, while extreme, was far from unique. This led me to establish the Phoenix Foundation, a nonprofit organization providing resources and support for adults dealing with toxic family relationships. We offered everything from legal referrals to support groups to emergency financial assistance for those trying to escape abusive family situations. The foundation's name came from Rachel's observation that I had risen from the ashes of my family's destruction. My personal life blossomed in ways that years of therapy hadn't quite achieved. Without the constant weight of family criticism and manipulation, I found myself more open to connections. It was at one of our foundation's support group meetings that I met Thomas Chen, a soft-spoken software engineer who had his own history with narcissistic parents. Our first conversation lasted 4 hours, both of us marveling at finding someone who truly understood the unique grief of losing a family that was still alive. Thomas approached our relationship with the same patience and understanding that had made him successful in his own healing journey. He never pushed for more than I was ready to give, understood when family holidays triggered anxiety, and celebrated the small victories that might seem insignificant to others. When he proposed a year later, it was during a quiet dinner at home, with him saying simply, "I want to build the family with you that neither of us got to have growing up." Our wedding was small but perfect, held in Sophia's backyard with only our chosen family in attendance. Mrs. Chen officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. Rachel was my maid of honor, and Derek stood as one of Thomas's groomsmen. Our ex-relationship transformed into genuine friendship. Simon walked me down the aisle, telling me beforehand that it was one of the greatest honors of his life. The day was notably absent of blood relatives, but I felt no loss. As I looked around at the faces of people who had earned their place in my life through love and loyalty rather than genetic lottery, I felt complete. My mother-in-law, Thomas's adoptive mother who had saved him from his own toxic situation, welcomed me with open arms and a kind of maternal warmth I had never known. A year into our marriage, Thomas and I began the IVF journey. It was a decision we made carefully, both of us determined to break the cycles of abuse that had marked our childhoods. Throughout the process, our support system rallied around us. Sophia researched the best clinics, Mrs. Chen knitted tiny sweaters for Hope, and even my colleagues created a meal train for the difficult treatment days. When I finally saw those 2 pink lines, my first call wasn't to parents who should have been overjoyed at becoming grandparents. It was to Rachel, who screamed so loudly her own kids came running to see what was wrong. The pregnancy was difficult but made bearable by the army of chosen family who showed up for every appointment, every scare, every small victory. During this time, I received a letter from my mother. I recognized her handwriting immediately and almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity won, and I read her pages of manipulation disguised as apology. She had heard about my pregnancy through the family grapevine and suddenly wanted to reconcile. "A child needs grandparents," she wrote, as if she hadn't wished I'd never been born. I brought the letter to my therapy session, where Dr. Williams and I ceremonially burned it in her fireplace. "You don't owe them access to your child just because they share DNA," she reminded me. "Your job is to protect your baby from the same toxicity you experienced." The ashes of that letter felt like the last chain breaking. My daughter arrived on a spring morning, surrounded by the people who had become our family. Sarah Chin Marshall entered the world with Thomas's eyes and my stubborn chin, immediately wrapped in the blanket Mrs. Chen had knitted months before. As I held her for the first time, I whispered promises that she would never doubt her worth, never question her place in our family, never be made to feel like a burden or disappointment. The foundation grew alongside my daughter, expanding to 3 cities and helping hundreds of people escape toxic family situations. We created scholarship programs for students whose families withdrew financial support as punishment, emergency housing for those fleeing abuse, and legal aid for those seeking restraining orders. Every success story reminded me that breaking free had been the right choice. 5 years later, at Sarah's birthday party, I watched her run between the guests who had become her extended family. Aunt Rachel was teaching her to braid flower crowns, Uncle Simon was sneaking her extra cake, and Grandma Chen was telling stories about dragons and phoenixes. Thomas caught my eye across the yard and smiled, our son sleeping peacefully in his arms. That evening, after everyone had gone home and the children were asleep, I found myself on the porch with Thomas, reflecting on the journey. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stood up that Thanksgiving?" he asked, taking my hand. I thought about it, imagining a life still spent chasing approval that would never come, pouring money into a bottomless pit of manipulation, accepting abuse as the price of family. "I think I would have eventually broken," I admitted. "Maybe not that day, but someday." The only question was whether I'd break free or just break. I squeezed his hand, feeling the solid weight of my wedding ring, the symbol of the family we had chosen to create. Standing up that day saved my life. Not dramatically, but in all the ways that matter. As if summoned by the conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I knew without looking it was another flying monkey, someone recruited to try to breach the wall I had built. I deleted it without reading, a simple action that would have been impossible 5 years ago. Their power over me had ended the moment I stopped believing their narrative about who I was. Inside, I checked on our children one more time, watching them sleep peacefully in rooms filled with love and acceptance. Sarah's wall was covered with photos of her huge chosen family, each face representing someone who had earned their place through love rather than obligation. This was what family should be, I realized. Not perfect, but present. Not without conflict, but without cruelty. Not bound by blood, but by choice. The woman who had smiled and stood up that Thanksgiving night had known, somehow, that she was choosing between 2 futures. One where she remained the family scapegoat forever, and one where she could build something beautiful from the ashes of what should have been. Looking at my sleeping children, my loving husband, and the photos of our chosen family throughout our home, I knew I had chosen correctly. Sometimes the family you're born into breaks you. But if you're lucky, if you're brave, if you can smile in the face of cruelty and stand up anyway, you might just find that the family you choose can heal you. And that healing, that choice, that courage to build something better? That's the greatest revenge of all. To anyone watching who's struggling with toxic family, who's been told they're not enough, who's considering standing up but feels afraid, I want you to know, you deserve better. Family should be a soft place to land, not a battlefield to survive. And if your blood family can't provide that, I promise you that chosen family is out there waiting for you. You just have to be brave enough to stand up and find them. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family members who didn't have your best interests at heart? How did you find the courage to prioritize your own well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family trauma and building the life you deserve. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their struggle. Remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish when the alternative is letting others destroy you. Thank you for being part of my journey today, and may you find the strength to write your own story of freedom and healing.